Good morning, good night, good everything in between. Welcome to the Literary Ramblings podcast. I am one of your hosts, Cornelia. I forgot my own name for a second there. I forgot that I want to go by Cornelia now.
And I'm Charlotte, and I've always gone by Charlotte, so that's nice and simple.
Listen, I'm trying to do my pen name. I'm using my full name as my pen name, sort of.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, well,
Just gotta remember to introduce yourself that way.
yeah, and you gotta remember to call me that too.
I will do my very best.
Listen, it'll flow eventually.
Hmm.
Nobody's really listening to these anyway currently. So we're still very early on in this podcast. We've only been doing it for like a year, which is wild.
Yeah,
And
it has only been a year.
so Charlotte, I was wondering, what is the weirdest thing you have in your car?
The weirdest thing I have in my car?
Yes.
Hmm. I mean, I feel like, okay, is a sleeping bag weird to have in your car? Or is that fairly normal?
That's weird. Why do you have a sleeping bag in your car?
Well, I thought everyone has like emergency blankets or something. Well, I have a sleeping bag because the zipper broke on it, but I was like, it's still pretty warm.
Okay, fine, that's fair. I have no survival anything in my car.
Wow.
My car is very empty.
You're in danger.
Yeah, I mean, I have a snow brush, which is like significantly more prepared than the rest of Ohio is at any given moment. So I've always felt kind of good about that.
True, true.
A
I do
snow
have one
brush
of those.
and I have jumper cables, which is
Wow,
also
I as
something
well.
that when I moved to Ohio, everybody thought I was weird that I had jumper cables. And I was like, in Michigan, you just had jumper cables in the car. You sold the jumper cables
Hmm.
with the car because your next car would already have them inside as well.
Yep.
That's
If
how
you buy
common jumper
a
cables
used
are.
car, they just come along. Yep.
Yeah, you just get jumper cables. It was so standard in every vehicle that when I came down here, I was like, why don't you have jumper cables in your car though? Like, that's weird to me.
It
And
is
then most
weird.
people, a lot of my friends don't have snow brushes in their cars either, which is also weird, even though we don't get that much snow. But it's
Hmm.
still also a foreign concept because that's also, it's snow brush and jumper cables. That's what I grew up with.
So then what's the weird thing you have in your car?
I really couldn't decide. I heard that question
What?
as like an icebreaker and I thought it would be good because I thought you would have a weird thing in your car.
I mean, I keep a notebook in there. I keep bubble tea straws. Is that weird?
No, I have extra straws in my car too.
Well, they're specifically
Um,
for bubble tea though, like giant
ugh,
metal ones.
yeah. Well, I mean, still, if you drink bubble tea, I have McDonald's straws in my car because I drink McDonald's drinks.
So fancy.
Yeah, I can't think of the weirdest thing that I have in my car because I don't keep
Ooh.
almost anything in my car. But right now, I guess I do have my friend's tripod right now
Mhm.
in my trunk
That's a little weird.
because I was gonna use it and then I still haven't and I need to give it back to her. But neither of us are good at remembering that kind of thing. So I don't know. It'll
The
probably sit in my car for another month or two.
the other weirdest thing that I have in my car is a map of Michigan, even though I live in Minnesota now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's still. I
It's
mean, I guess
and who has
maps kind
paper
of sit around.
maps?
Yeah, I don't. I
So
don't.
I feel like it's gotten to be a weird item to have in your car, even though it used to be very standard.
Yeah, and honestly, it probably should remain standard because there are tons of places that you can go that you don't have cell service, so you don't have a map.
Yeah, I guess I can only get lost within, a couple hundred miles of Michigan or else I'm screwed.
Yeah. Oh well. Good luck. The only other
Thanks.
weird thing that I have in my car that I would probably consider weird is that I still have the original radio for the car, but it's not
Oh,
like
right.
it's just in my trunk.
You found it. That's the truly weird thing you have.
Yeah, because I don't know what to do with it because the dealership that I bought it off of, because it's a used car, and he was just like, yeah, so the original radio is in the trunk. He's like, I've never plugged it in, so I don't know if it works, and I don't know why they took it out, but they left it in the trunk, so it's yours now. And I was like, okay, cool, but like, what am I supposed to do with it? So now it's just gonna sit in the trunk until my car rusts into oblivion because I'm never gonna do anything with it because I don't know what to do with it.
I mean, you could probably take it somewhere to be recycled or something, like, I don't know, a pawn shop.
Maybe. I don't know. It's old.
Yeah.
It's not
That's why
like
I
a
said a
nice new
pawn shop.
radio. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't take that to like Goodwill or something. I don't even know that they'd take it, and they probably wouldn't want to resell it. So,
No. How clean do you keep your car?
it's there's a lot of stuff, but there's no trash. Like I don't leave trash in my car.
Okay.
CDs get everywhere. I have
Yeah,
some reusable bags.
you are a CD person.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff, not a lot of stuff, but there is stuff in my car. But other than like coupons that may have expired recently, there's no like garbage in my car.
Okay.
Okay. Is yours pretty clean?
It's fairly clean most of the time. It's funny because my dad got in my car the other week, and I do have passengers relatively often, but he got into the driver's side, and there's usually some trash on the passenger side. Sorry, he got into the passenger side. And there's usually some trash there. It's never like overwhelming or anything. It's just usually like napkins or like some straw wrappers. And
Mm-hmm.
he got in and he was like, "Oh, you should clean up your car because like what if like a nice young man got into a car with you?" And I was like, I laughed out loud because I was like, my father has not gotten into a car owned by a single adult woman in probably 50 years at this point. Because my car with a little bit of trash that is in it is nothing compared to so many women I know.
Oh yeah. People
Like
have like
I
bottles, especially bottles and
oh
like cups
man. I
and I
have
hate that. I hate stepping on
yeah,
cups.
me too. I really hate it. So I don't let my car like get bad.
Hmm.
But I was like, I got out of my car the other day at the mall and I parked next to some, and I knew it was owned by a girl. Absolutely 100%. Because I looked over at this car and it was just trash all the way up to the seat on the passenger side. And I was like,
Gross.
clearly a woman's car.
Like part raccoon.
Yeah! And I just thought, my father's so out of touch. Which, like, he doesn't have any reason. Like, he's been married for 35 years or whatever. So it's not like he's been in other people's cars very often. But it really showed in that moment.
Hmm. Like you don't even know.
Yeah, he really doesn't. He has no idea, which I think is funny. All right. I'm really bad at transitioning out of small talk.
Yeah, me
I
too. I
know
was trying to think of a smooth way.
we're supposed to like have small talk at the beginning and then transition into the book, but I have no concept of how to do that. So, here we are transitioning into the book. I don't know, cars are like spaceships and our book is about spaceships, sort of, not really.
Except for you never actually get in one in the whole book.
No, isn't that depressing? Okay, we read Insignia. It's by S.J. Kincaid. And it was my pick for February, which is the
You
month in
got the
which
month
we're
right.
recording this. Yeah. And I'm going to read the back of the book, which I don't really like the back of this book. I think it's really dumb, and it's not why I got the book or picked it. So I'll read it to get it out of the way. All right, a thrilling sci-fi adventure, an unforgettable hero. 14-year-old Tom Raines looks set to go the same way as his listless, gambling addict of a father, with no hope for the future, until one day everything changes. Tom is recruited by the state to become a combatant, one of an elite group of teen soldiers chosen for their unique virtual reality skills to fight World War III in space. But is Tom's future really as safe as the Army claims? Are there spies and corruption in their number? And what happens when you question the rules? I
I
just
agree.
realized
I
you don't
don't
really
like
find
that.
out any of those things.
No,
Book. Don't find out in this exciting book by
you do
S.J.
not.
Kincaid. I picked this book because it's by an author that I used to really like. I talked about this in the last podcast.
Briefly. Yeah.
I picked this because I read The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid, and I highly recommend The Diabolic. I think it's a great book, but it's the first book in a trilogy, as is Insignia. But The Diabolic was so good, and then I read the second book, and it was so bad, and
Mm.
I hated it. And I still have the third book on my bookshelf right now, and I have only made it through a couple of pages, because I am just so disgusted by the second book that I cannot stomach reading it. And one of my friends also read The Diabolic, and then she read the second book, and she's read the third book, and she's like, "You need to read it for me." And I'm like, "I don't know if I can."
Mm.
Because it pains me. Because I really loved The Diabolic, and the second book just went so far off the rails that I was like, "You can't fix this." There's nothing that she can do in the third book to fix what she did in the second. So
Oh.
really skeptical. But I bought Insignia and I chose it before I had read the second book, which was a while ago. So I've had this book on my shelf for a while, and I thought we're gonna read it anyway because I really liked the first book in the other trilogy that I read by her. So like I was like, this should be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is still the first book. This also she wrote this before she wrote the Diabolic.
Oh.
Oh yeah, this is her debut novel.
Oh.
And
Okay.
it
That
reads like
clears.
one.
Yeah, it does. I was gonna say that clears some stuff up for me.
Yeah, I mean, if this had been written after the Diabolic, I think I would be even more skeptical, but I think it probably would have been better, actually.
Yeah. I feel like this book had ambitions but didn't achieve them.
Yes.
Like when you read the back of the book and we were like, yeah, that's not what happens. That's the thing. That's what she wanted to happen, I think.
Mhm.
But for instance, when it talks about discovering like spies among us and talking about these teens being uniquely qualified, we never really got to see what any of the other teens were capable of before they came to this place.
No.
Like there's
No.
no inkling of like why these particular people were chosen as combatants. I mean, there's one of them. You get Elliot Ramirez. You get his story kind of. But the
Yeah, I
rest
don't
of
even remember
them,
his story.
I mean, she gives some random achievements that they have on their profiles, but that's the closest it gets.
Yeah. Let's talk about the plot a little bit. This is not a very well-known book
No.
from what I've seen. But basically, it is like on the back of the book, 14-year-old Tom Raines looks set to go the same way as his father, who is kind of a failure. But Tom's really good at video games.
Hmm.
So he gets picked up by the military
Yeah.
because
And
World War III is not being fought physically, it's being fought by proxy in
yeah.
space. And it's not about countries, it's about corporations.
Yep.
Um,
And it's not just video games as in like a console. It's like virtual reality video games.
yeah. So he's
Because
so
I
good.
still remember you saying at the very beginning you were like this reminds me of Ready Player One, and I 100% agreed. Only at the beginning, like it gets different pretty fast, but I was like, oh, it's kind of the same vibe of like this kid who the only thing he really does is like hang out in VR, except that's normal in his world, and it's a little less
Yeah.
normal in this one. But
Yeah, because it's not like there isn't like an oasis like there is in Ready Player One. Like people have not switched their lives over to VR
no,
like
it's
at
just
all. It's
the
just
modern video game.
really yeah, and it's just really really popular. Cause like he goes to school in VR too.
Yeah, which does
Um,
make sense, I think, if VR really takes off.
yeah. So yeah, so Tom gets picked up by the military and he goes to the Spire, which is where he gets a brain implant, like a
Mm-hmm.
computer implant into his head, and that helps him be very smart and do things
Yes.
faster.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Spire is where all of these teens train. So a lot of teens are there and they're training, but not all of them will become combatants in the war.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what other people like end up doing. I guess there's like a lot of administrative stuff to do in the government anyway.
Yeah, and I feel like it's like you can be part of battles still, you just won't be like a major player. Like you
Yeah,
wouldn't get your own spaceship. You might be like helping in another way in the military. Yeah.
yeah. So Tom goes to the Spire and he meets a few nice people, and he becomes friends with them. And that is what the first, like, I don't know, half of the book is about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little disappointing because the plot does not pick up very quickly. And
And The funniest thing to me about that is that I thought the very beginning went almost too fast. Like it felt like she was skimming over the part where he got accepted into the military.
Yeah, but then it is pointed out later that it did happen really fast. That there were a bunch of things that he was supposed to do, but he just
Mhm.
skipped over anyway. So,
But
I mean,
again,
it is
that still
fast.
feels like her rushing it along. So,
Yeah. Yeah, because he didn't do any like psychological evaluations or anything like that, which we find out like towards the end that he was supposed to, but he
hmm
just didn't because the general that recruited him just it was like special circumstances and he just wanted to get him through.
hmm yeah,
Which I guess is fine for the story, but literally he just spends all this time training in the Spire and nothing really happens until Dalton, who's his
not really stepdad.
yeah, I was gonna say sort of stepdad, but his mom's dating Dalton.
hmm
So sort of step father figure. Anyway, Dalton hates him
hmm
and Dalton is part of one of the corporations that's fighting in the war. And Dalton decides that he wants to use Tom as a recruit. So all the combatants
hmm
have to have sponsors, and they're sponsored by the corporations that are involved in the wars. And Dalton wants to use Tom because he kind of already has an in with him, but Tom's not polished enough.
Yeah.
He's not a very refined person, which
hmm
definitely will bring up later. So Dalton tricks Tom and ends up basically starting to reprogram Tom's computer in his head so that
hmm
he acts more like a normal civilized human being, which is completely against Tom's character.
Yes.
Tom figures it out. I guess I'm given the whole plot of the book, but it's kind of relevant to like
hmm
discuss it. So he's being reprogrammed. He figures it out. His friends figure it out. And one of his friends is a really good computer programmer, and she gets all of that out of his head. And then Tom has revenge upon them by going to like their company's big party and basically destroying the party,
hmm
which was really good. What happens next?
They figure out that there's a leak in the spire.
Oh yeah, so there's a leak. So all the combatants are secret except for like one
hmm
from each country essentially. And so there's a leak that leaks all of the combatants' identities. And Tom is suspected of being the leak, and there's like a whole bunch of stuff that goes on with that. And Tom resists like telling information because if he does, his friend, who's really good at programming, has essentially committed treason for
Yeah.
good reason, I guess.
Not really
And
for that good of a reason, in my opinion, but
yeah, but I mean, it wasn't like it's not actually treason, but it's
yeah.
considered treason.
Yeah, she
So in
wasn't
order
intentionally committing treason.
Yeah, so in order to protect her, he like he basically acts super super
Sus.
sus
hmm
like the whole time. And he gets out of that by the general that recruited him in the first place gives him a chance to fight in the war because he knows how good he is. And so Tom decides to do that. He takes the opportunity and at the very last minute in the 11th
You need to
hour
spoil it?
no, I guess I won't. I don't have to spoil it. I
Stopping
don't
there.
know. Listen, I gave this book 2 stars. I
That's
don't
fair.
really care. I guess that's as far as I really need to go with the plot, though, for you to really
Yeah.
understand things that we talk about. Because the
But
next thing I want to talk about is his character. Tom is friggin' boring, dude.
yeah.
He's so lame. He
He
calls himself a loser at the beginning, and I'm like, you're still a loser at the end. And the thing is, he is so prideful. He cannot handle any kind of humiliation. Nothing. He
mhm.
cannot handle a single second of disrespect. And he is just disgustingly
No,
consistent throughout the entire book.
actually, I don't agree with you on that.
Oh, please share with
Because
me, Charlotte.
I
What do you mean?
he is fine with being humiliated, but only if it's for a good reason. Like he was completely fine with when one of their professors, as kind of revenge on him, like humiliated him in front of the entire class, but he was keeping a secret for his friend. He didn't care.
Yeah, but he still wanted to kill the professor.
I mean, yeah.
He
But that's
wasn't any
justifiable.
less he wasn't any less prideful about it. He still sought revenge over
Yeah,
them.
but I would argue that there's some nuance there, as all I'm saying.
I suppose you could argue some nuance, but he does not change.
No, no, he's the
He
same throughout the entire.
never yeah, he never changes throughout the book. He seeks revenge at every turn, which like can be a great character trait, but usually at some point that backfires on a character
I mean, it did backfire
because
on him
when
at the very end when he almost ruins his friendship with a mysterious possible spy person, Medusa.
yeah, but I think that they overreacted to what he did.
Well, yeah, but
he
that's
didn't do he did not do anything outside of listen, there's gonna be more spoilers, I guess, because if we're gonna bring that up.
I mean, I'm just saying.
No, because I've thought about that too,
Hmm.
and they get really mad because now he knows what they look like, and I'm like, okay, but only he knows what you look
Yeah,
like.
he
Like
didn't
he
do
did
anything
not,
with it.
he didn't blast it anywhere. He didn't do anything that would like reveal their identity to like the whole population or the whole world or anything. It was just him, and I'm like, I think they overreacted.
Yeah,
So
I agree. And the only other thing that I could see where he might have changed a little bit is his relationship with Elliot Ramirez at the very end.
yeah, and even that, I do not feel like he treated
He
Elliot any different.
Well, but I would say he did though.
How so?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that he really had an opportunity.
Yeah,
So
but he
maybe
did
jury's out.
have opportunity because he makes a comment about how he was like slightly nicer to Elliot, and he was like, "Oh, that's as close as I'm ever gonna get to apologizing to him,"
Yeah.
and that's it. There's
You don't see
never
that
like
as
anything
enough
else.
any kind
No,
of
I don't think
character.
that's enough. That's the
That is
only
some
character
character
change
growth.
that he goes through. It's so minor. He doesn't
It
change as a
is, but
character.
it's
He
not
does
nothing.
nothing.
It's not nothing.
Oh, okay. It's virtually nothing.
It is virtually nothing, but it is still something. The meter moved a little bit. But
Ever so
overall,
slightly.
I do agree with you. He didn't really learn much from this, any of his experiences. He regrets nothing.
Yeah. Maybe that's what really gets me.
Hmm.
Because he
Like,
doesn't ever think back to things and think like, "Oh, I could have been a little more humble and like avoided this entire situation or maybe I could have been a nicer person and not had to go through all of these extra awful things that I put myself through just
yeah,
because I was being prideful."
like the professor that he decides to hate, it's like, if you would have taken 2 seconds and thought about it a little bit longer, you maybe could have been like friends with him, actually.
Yeah, and he would have been an extremely valuable ally.
Yep.
Tom just decides
But
that he hates people and then he moves on and he never changes his mind.
I do think that he is a bit of a teenager in that sense, though.
Yeah, I guess, but he does also not change or grow at all. He never looks back and says, I should have been friends with this professor from the start. He always looks back and says, that professor's a jerk.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, and
problem
that
is
was
never Tom.
frustrating,
Yeah.
especially
Which
as the book went on.
I had a moment because I actually like I put sticky notes in my books to take notes sometimes. And on page the book is like 450 pages long, give or take.
Which is
And
pretty
on
long, actually.
page 370, it is revealed that the events in this book have taken place over a 5-month period.
And what's the significance of that to you?
It's only 5 months. And he spent one entire month
Just like
getting his
healing.
brain rewired by Dalton,
Oh, yeah. Is
which was
that at
also like not that long. I thought because there's a comment that he makes that he's like, oh, because eventually he's rewired enough that they just send him like updates and he just plugs them into himself.
hmm.
And he says that he's been self updating for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But then, like a couple pages later, he says it's only been 31 days.
Hmm.
since like starting the whole thing.
I
And the
mean, I
first
guess,
update was an update, and then it was like, okay, now we're gonna wait 4 or 5 days and then do another one. And then I felt like it was implied that they were gonna do it weekly for a little bit, but apparently they literally only did it weekly like one more time,
yeah.
and then he just started self-updating, and then it's over.
Yeah, I
That whole
agree. The
thing really
timeline
annoyed me.
is pretty fuzzy. I didn't pay that much attention to it, to be honest, because I didn't care.
I have problems with timelines. We discussed this in the
Yes.
Ruin of Kings review.
Hmm.
So I tend to pay attention to them just enough. And I kind of regret when I do because it's times like these where I'm like, you have destroyed my suspension of disbelief. I don't believe
Yeah.
that everything that took place in this book took place in 5 months.
And it's honestly something I'm kind of worried about as a future author myself, is that I'm going to make a mistake like that, because I
Hmm.
could see myself doing it, because it is honestly hard to track sometimes.
Yes, it is. Honestly, I try to track seasons more than I track actual time.
Agreed. Like,
Because I think
just
that
avoid
seasons are
saying.
they're a little more amorphous, and it's
Hmm.
more like, well, some places winter lasts for 8 months and some places it lasts for, 9 or 10
Yeah.
or 3.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't have to be exact. But when you put time frames on things,
Yeah.
I avoid time frames entirely. I just try to figure out if it's a realistic. I try never to say like, oh, it's been 2 weeks, unless it's been
Hmm.
like a 2 week jump.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless you're specifically jumping forward in time, then it's easier to just be like, okay, here's 2 weeks. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that the self-updating thing really hit me harder, and
Mm.
that made me pay attention to the timeline more
I'm,
because I was annoyed that he only spent a month dealing with that
yeah. It seems
because
like
it
it should have been a much bigger thing as far as the
yeah,
impact on him as a person.
yes, and it just didn't. And that's what I felt like several plot points in this book were.
Hmm.
That it was like, okay, this thing is a huge deal when it happens, but then it like doesn't have any bearing
Yeah.
on like the rest of it.
There weren't enough consequences in this book, and I never felt like we were actually fighting World War III.
No, that's
Like,
another thing.
there was no weight to anything.
No, and it's a lot because it's being fought by corporations and not
That's part of
countries.
it.
So you have people who are like from all over the world and they're just kind of friends
Hmm.
because nobody really cares about countries anymore because it's not the countries that are fighting, it's the corporations.
Yeah. Yeah, which is fine. I was okay with that as a concept. I just feel like, you can't bill it as World War III or be like, these are some super serious things, and then it literally just feels like a video game the whole time.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help that nobody really dies either
No.
because it's all fought by proxy. So it's really they're fighting with resources over resources.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
But I still think you could make it feel weighty, and she just didn't do that.
Yeah, well, the world building isn't that great in this book. Because,
Yeah.
like, we spend time with Tom, but Tom is billed very much as an exception, and
Hmm.
everybody else around him just kind of lives their life as normal. Like, they
Hmm.
don't seem affected by being in the midst of World War III.
No. And, well, which makes sense because in their society it's been going on for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just going to continue until someone actually wins. So I think that goes back to, though, what we learn about other characters is only the stuff that's relevant in the exact moment. So,
Yeah.
like, he has friends, but the most background we get on his friends is like when they have this parents' day and the parents visit, and we see like a tiny bit of what they might have been like before they came here.
Yeah, but everyone is
That's it.
really isolated because they're
Mhm.
all in the spire, and it's a very specific regimented space.
Yeah.
So you don't actually spend time with the characters, you just spend time learning what the characters are learning. I mean, there's like a whole exposition drop in one of the chapters that's literally just you're sitting in a classroom and the teacher is telling us all about World War III.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly boring, and I don't know that I retained much information from it.
No. And the one interesting character that I had, who was Beamer, who is Tom's roommate when he first gets there, he's interesting because he kind of doesn't want to be there, and like
Mhm.
keeps purposely dying in VR and stuff.
Mhm.
And then eventually, like, he just kind of has a mental breakdown, but she doesn't deal with it. It like gets put off
No.
screen, and I'm like, why did you
Yeah.
introduce him? This was actually good, like a good reality check, and instead she just kind of brushes it away.
Yeah. Like when that conflict started, I was like, I am going to be annoyed by this. And then I was annoyed because it wasn't actually dealt with because
Mhm.
I thought it was a different conflict at first.
Oh,
And
okay.
then when it's revealed that he was what it was and how he was struggling like with just the existence of what he was doing, I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, that's like really interesting." And I'm glad that it's being brought up and then it is just brushed aside. And it's funny because Beamer had a lot of the same conflicts internally that Tom also had.
Mhm.
And so it was like, well, this is the parallel. And Tom talks to Beamer. He's one conversation with him about it.
Yeah.
And basically, Tom's like, yeah, but like we signed up for this.
Yeah.
Because the way that
It
Tom
is
dealt with his
ridiculous.
own feelings about it was that he was just like, well, this is just what I'm going to do because I don't want to go back to my old life.
Yep.
And
He
that was
just
it.
shoves it all in a box, I guess.
Yeah. And then Beamer can't do that. And we never actually explore Tom's feelings about that. He
No.
never like becomes introspective about how he and Beamer had a lot of similarities.
Mhm.
He never thinks about it. He never thinks like Beamer was a wimp or he never thinks that like wow, Beamer was really strong for like stepping back. He never there's nothing.
Yeah.
He
Which is
never
worse.
makes a judgment call about whether he thinks that Beamer was right or wrong.
Yeah, which could have really helped our understanding of Tom as a character. Like, even if he didn't change, even if he did say, like, oh, Beamer's a wimp, like, that would have been something. Instead, it just feels like he just kind of lets it happen and is like, oh, well, I guess Beamer's out of the program now.
Yeah, and that's it. Even though he talked about how Beamer and the rest of the people that he was meeting, this is the first time that he's had like real friends in his life.
Yeah,
And so you'd think that that would be more impactful to like gain a friend and actually feel close to somebody for the first time ever, and then they just leave.
yeah.
But he doesn't even talk about it like that, and they don't talk about Beamer like
Nope.
at all, almost ever again. I think he's mentioned offhand once more,
Mm,
but that's it.
yeah. Yeah, so it's just,
A lot of stuff unexplored in
yeah.
this book. And it's funny because I mean it is almost 450 pages long, which
Hmm.
is pretty long
Yeah.
for just a book in general. And there was just so much unexplored in it. And it wasn't that the world was left too unexplored. Like I don't mind that it didn't necessarily feel like World War III all the time. You know,
Hmm.
I was just kind of like, okay, well, it is VR, and that's a really tall order to
Hmm.
make somebody really feel like that matters
Yeah.
because it's a world in which that like there's so many differences that it's hard to relate to the world in general. So I didn't necessarily mind that, but I do mind that the characters were pretty one-dimensional.
Hmm.
Like Tom, eh, he has very little character growth,
Hmm.
and his friends really don't have any either.
No, I mean, you know, one of them becomes a different person, but that's a whole plot thing.
Yeah, and it's really just him becoming himself,
Yes. Yeah.
not him becoming a different person. He's not really like that different, arguably,
Yeah.
character wise. Like who he is as a person. He's still just as like nice and just as loyal and all of
I
that.
mean, I do think Wyatt, the programming friend, is pretty interesting and the next closest of being an actual character.
Yeah, because she does actually experience character growth,
Mm-hmm.
which is still small amounts,
Yeah.
but I get the impression that she's supposed to be autistic,
Yeah.
and so she doesn't have many social skills.
Mm-hmm. So she's
And
very blunt and
yes,
hasn't made very many friends when Tom
yeah,
arrives.
yeah, and she learns to be a little bit less blunt and she learns some more social skills and she's able to relate to at least their small group of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And they do grow pretty close. which I
Yeah.
liked.
Mhm.
And I did really like Wyatt. And I think you're right. She does have the most character growth of anyone in this book. Vic
Yeah.
has none.
Because
Vic is
no.
the same character from the beginning to the end. And I was very disappointed in that because he starts off as like kind of goofy comic relief, and
Mhm.
then he sort of is a little bit more serious and a little bit interesting,
Mhm.
and then it's like that's immediately taken away again and he's just back to the goofy comic relief.
Yep.
He has like a couple of moments early-ish on where you're like, "Oh, okay, so they're going to grow into like friends." And it's like, "Nope, he's just the comic relief all the way through."
He is.
He
Yep.
is
I mean, they
nothing
are
else.
they are friends, I guess, but yeah, he's just a clown type character.
Yeah, they don't have very many like serious moments
No.
together, even though he's supposed to be Tom's best friend.
Yep. And I
And
will I did like the parts when they're in the VR, like practicing. I thought they were fun and like relatively creative and stuff.
mhm.
But I didn't feel like they tied very well to the plot.
Yeah,
And
they were all very like random.
yeah, and Tom is just such a loner of a character that he wouldn't really interact with anyone in VR, so then it
Yeah.
kind of undermines the whole thing.
Yeah, which is like the quote unquote problem throughout
Mhm.
a lot of it is that he's told that he probably won't be able to advance far in the Spire because he's not a team player. And you're
Mhm.
like, okay, so is he going to learn how to be a team player? No.
No.
No growth allowed. He learns that he can be a lone wolf indefinitely, and
Yep.
he's better at it. And it's like, okay, like, yes and no. I would have appreciated a lot more if he had learned to be a team player and also be a lone wolf because there are times when you can be both of those things
Yeah.
and it works better. But he really didn't ever learn to be a team player. He
No.
never like he does to some extent rely on his friends, but they were never I don't feel like he ever like truly relied on them for
No.
something that like really mattered.
He never
Does
told
that
them the
make sense?
truth at a point where they would have had time to do anything about it. He always was telling them the truth after the fact.
Yeah. So he never actually got their help for situations until it was too late to fix the situation, and then they basically had to like scramble
Yeah.
to do
They
what
either
they could.
they could choose either to let him fail spectacularly or help him somewhat begrudgingly, not happy about the decisions he'd already made.
Yeah. So it was always cleaning up his messes.
Mhm.
And there was no in between. Which sort of sucks. That's not really how you should like be friends with people.
No.
Like he never sought their counsel. He
Mhm.
only sought their help in cleaning up his messes. That's
Yeah,
all he
their
ever did.
abilities. I mean, the funny
Yeah.
thing is that like the way you're talking about him, like it sounds like someone you would hate, but I didn't hate him in the book.
No,
No.
I did not either. I think he was fine. I would not be friends with him in real life.
Yes.
But I also
Agreed.
probably wouldn't care about him in real life. Like, he would be that high school student that I would see from a distance and be like, not going to be friends with you, but I mean, I'll watch you and see
Mhm.
what happens. And that's what he would be to me. I would never get involved with him cuz he's absolutely trouble. But
Yep.
I wouldn't like have ill feelings toward him. And I would not ever like I never like reveled in his misfortune.
Yeah.
I would get frustrated in his misfortune
Yeah, definitely.
because he brought a lot of it on himself. But yeah, I didn't really dislike him, which
And
is kind of weird given how I have been describing him.
I guess it's because you're in his head and it's like so it's all from his perspective. And you also do know that he had a terrible childhood basically. So, I
That's
mean,
true.
there's a reason he doesn't trust people. Um
Yeah.
I do think it's weird though because he says he wants to like make a difference. Like that's part of the reason he's there. He likes winning. He's definitely competitive, prideful, all of that. But
Hmm.
he never uses that idea of like I want to be important while he's in the spire, which I think is hilarious. And I don't know if it's just a case of him like saying something to make himself sound cooler than he really is, you know? But I feel like
Um,
he returns to that a couple times of being like, I want to do something important. I don't want to go back to being a nobody. But then when he's in the school, like he doesn't seem to actively be trying to excel, kind of like the teamwork thing. Like,
yeah, like he doesn't think that getting good grades and doing well in the classes is what's going to get him far in life.
and he's not completely wrong, but it just seems like a weird tack to take for like he really wants to be here and doesn't want to go home, you know?
Yeah, like he's terrified of going home.
Yeah. Like he
He
gets really
does not
mad
want
because
to.
they take out his implant early because it's messing with his growth hormones.
No, they shut it off. They shut off a part of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they don't take out the whole thing, but
Yeah,
they do like modify it or whatever. And he's like he
yeah,
would rather like suffer through it to be 6 foot tall or whatever than
yeah,
be small and feel unimportant.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He really just wants to be important, though. Like that's it. It's sort of a shallow character motivation, though,
Yeah.
because he's like you said, like he says those things, like he wants to be important, but he doesn't excel in school. He does things. He acts like he wants to be important to like everyone and to show the world who he is. But when it comes down to it, he really only focuses on his friends and
Yep.
being important to them. And he
Hmm.
does things to protect them. And he never really like considers the bigger picture of things. So he's
Yeah.
very much like a I don't want to be a quote unquote loser and go back to his old life, but then he doesn't do anything to stay there.
Yeah.
This new life.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that this book suffers a little bit from is it never I don't know, it doesn't feel like a real society in some ways. I don't know.
Well, they are very separate from the society too, which is always a downfall of this. And I think that that's a big reason why it never feels like you're actually in a war because you are not boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Tom is in a specific facility full of, I mean, essentially it is kind of full of propaganda because it is
Hmm.
for the military and they do want them to believe certain things. And so he is already separate from society. And before this, he was still kind of separate from society
Yeah, because they were
because he was an
drifters.
outcast and
Hmm.
they went from place to place. They were very nomadic. It was hard to pin him down. It was hard for the general in the military to find him
Yeah.
because his dad and he moved around so much because they didn't live anywhere. They just stayed in hotels when they could afford it.
Yeah.
So he was already an outcast from the society and then he's essentially thrust into a position where he's supposed to protect the society that he's an outcast from, which never comes up. Now that I think about it, he does
No.
not blame society for his problems, which I guess good on him.
Yeah, even
But
though his dad is basically blaming his problems on society.
yeah, he 100% does.
I will say some of the coolest parts for me of the book were the parts where Tom basically has this special ability where he can go into other machines. And I did actually really like those descriptions of like him interfacing with a machine and almost kind of losing himself in this digital world.
Yeah, I like that, and I like that as a concept, like the losing of self a little bit,
Mhm.
and then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, which is sad because
It
that
irritated me.
she
It
didn't
was
really
good
fully
description.
explore that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I did also like those ones. I think I liked them less and less the longer it went on, and I don't
Yeah,
know
'cause it
why.
never culminated in anything. Like he never actually lost himself for very long.
No, and it doesn't. I mean, it helps him in the end, but
Hmm.
it's never like that important of a skill, I guess.
It is a game-changing ability, though. But again,
It
she
is, but
suffers
he
from
doesn't act like it. Like nobody
no.
knows about it. Like the one professor that he hates finds out about it and he's like floored by it and he's like, "Wow,
Yeah.
this is incredible. Like how do you do this blah blah." And then Tom won't tell him
Yep.
because Tom is stupid. I don't know, that whole thing, like Tom keeping information back and I was like, I get
Mhm.
why. And like when they put it into perspective where they're like, "Oh, well they're going to get 10 years for treason." It's like, "Okay, um that really sucks. But also, you have this ability that this programmer who is like super, super important
Mm-hmm.
is like really floored by. You don't think you could maybe like leverage that
Yeah.
information? Like
Yeah.
you are important. Like you are an important cog in this machine. And he has leveraging power, but he never uses it. He's
Yep.
very much a like run in guns blazing kind of person.
Yeah.
And that's it. He doesn't have any other when it comes to like social interactions and when it comes to like playing the politics and playing that part of like the game of the spire, he's terrible at it.
Yeah.
He's the worst ever
And he
and
does actually acknowledge that about himself in his
yeah.
conversation with Elliot, who's like the poster child for the whole thing.
Yeah. But he doesn't do
Which,
anything about it.
yeah, and the
Which
reason it sounds like we're talking about Tom so much is because this book is just all about Tom.
it is.
Ultimate
There's really
Tile,
not much
all about
else.
Tom.
It is. There's
Yeah.
not really anything else. I mean, there's no other perspectives to hold on to. And he doesn't actually spend that much time with anybody else, to be
No?
perfectly frank. Like, he gets to know his friends, but he's always in his own head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot. He never. I feel like he doesn't really, like, project his emotions very much.
Yeah.
Because, that's really, like, a normal thing, like, either characters in a book or even in real life when you're like observing someone or like when you're talking to your friends, you'll often be like, oh, they seem off, they seem angry, they seem sad, they seem this way. And I don't feel like Tom ever puts that on his friends
No, not really. I mean,
unless
every
it's
once in
like
a while
the
on
obvious.
Wyatt.
Yeah,
Wyatt and Beamer.
yeah. But otherwise, like there are just everybody else in the book is just very obviously portraying one emotion or another. And Tom doesn't have to like gain any information to
Yeah.
tell what they're feeling. He just sort of knows, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't care that much.
I feel like this is also the second book that you picked. I think it was interesting that you brought up Rune of Kings already because this is another Rune of Kings. I was just thinking about the title, and Insignia barely comes up. What is that?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
don't
the
even know
call
what it's supposed to
signs?
be. Yeah, is it?
I don't
Is that
know.
called? I don't remember because I remember getting to the end of the book and thinking, yeah, I don't know what insignia has to do with anything.
I think that might be it, but I feel like it's a very weak connection once again. I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like you just picked this word because it sounded cool.
Yeah, the second book is called Vortex.
Yeah, she's just picking words that sound cool.
Yeah. It does sound cool
So,
though. I mean, you gotta admit, like it is cool though.
and then the other thing I wanted to ask you is, would you actually agree to let someone put a chip in your brain?
Absolutely not. Charlotte, I won't even download the Facebook app. Like,
Uh, yeah. Because that was the other piece of this. Like, he does have a moment where he thinks about it before he gets the chip put in.
yeah, and it
And he's
seems
like,
like it's gonna
oh,
be a problem. And
I
then
mean,
it's
it
not.
was a little bit with the growth hormone issue, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's very experimental. And they do kind of make that clear in the very beginning.
Yeah, they do.
Not that many people have these. And later you find out that the very first experiments went terribly wrong. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the first group of people, they did it on adults. They put chips in adults' brains and they all died.
mhm.
And it's
Except
like,
for a couple
okay.
who went crazy.
No, all of them died. The first experiment, everybody died. It
Oh,
was
was he in the second one?
yeah, there were and then the guy crossed country borders because he was disgraceful
Right.
killing all these
Oh, you're
people
right.
and he did it again.
Mhm.
He's like maybe this time it'll work.
He wasn't wrong. He did get it right eventually.
Yeah, eventually. So, would you put a chip in your brain?
Probably not, unless I mean, here's the one scenario where it could maybe happen. If I was like full body paralyzed and
And the
I was like, you know what, there's a virtual reality out there and I could experience it instantaneously, maybe I would
oh,
believe,
okay.
you know?
Yeah, I could see that.
That would be it though.
It's
No
like
shade on
really, really
paralyzed people.
specific. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Uh,
a really specific situation.
well, because I wouldn't want to risk. I mean, you're risking your entire life basically.
Yes. And the thing about the chips is that, like, I mean, it's proven in here that you can just reprogram people who have the chips in their
Yeah.
brains. You can literally just reprogram them to act the way that you want them to act. And that, I feel like, should have been a way bigger red flag than
Mm-hmm.
it was.
Way
Because
more terrifying.
it did not, like, Tom was scared by it, but he was also just really, really angry about it. And I absolutely feel like that's totally realistic. I think the way that
Mm-hmm.
he responded to that was realistic. But it does not occur to him that anybody else in the Spire could be having that happen to him. Because it didn't
Yeah.
happen. Like, it wasn't like the enemy came over and like plugged
Mm-hmm.
his brain into something and reprogrammed it. It was an ally. It was
Yeah.
somebody that was supposed that's like literally wants Tom on his side, and
Mm-hmm.
he's not like a traitor to his country or anything. And he did
Yeah.
that. And it's like, that's wild because anybody could do that. Like, it didn't take that much. And like there's a
Yeah.
whole plot point where it's like none of these kids know how to program. So
Mm-hmm.
they just have like the crappy Windows firewall that comes with your computer.
Yep.
And that's it. And they're
Yeah,
all
and none of
connected
them,
to Wi-Fi all the time.
and even after that experience, none of them take it that seriously. I mean, Wyatt just happens to be gifted. It's not even like she seems to be. I mean, she's into it, but like, that's not
Yeah, she
her
works at it,
primary
but
motivation.
yeah, she specifically just really likes programming. And
Yeah.
so she basically just saves all of her friends
Mm-hmm.
from dealing with a lot of stuff because she's just happens to be really good at it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and it's wild to me
Yeah.
that that
That.
wasn't like massive, that wasn't like huge. And it's like, why you think that they would have come up with like, I don't know, something to fix that problem, I guess.
I mean,
Because then
I
you
could
find
see.
out that you can net send to people if you have their IP address, and their IP addresses are basically public,
Yeah.
which is also wild to me because I, like, on my personal computer, would not give away my IP address to just like random people.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can do stuff with your IP address. Like now, imagine having that computer in your head, and that's just public.
I mean, maybe I just see it as unrealistic though from the start because I'm like, I could see the military or like I could see this happening to the military and less to like a private industry. Like I would see a private industry putting more money immediately into firewalls and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like I could see it not being cutting edge, especially as it was first starting out. But
yeah, but I feel like it would only take one incident
mhm.
for it to be like, and it seems like there have been incidences.
Yeah, they build up some firewall, they've said, but
Yeah, but not like all the time. And I don't know, it's just like it blew my mind. I was like, of all the things in the story to just like not deal with,
mhm.
that's
That's the
probably
one.
the worst thing. And maybe it's just because I'm not computer savvy per se
Mhm.
and know a couple of things about computers. And as soon as it was just like their IP addresses, as soon as I saw that those were just something that were just included in their profile, so like every student can see, I was like, why would you do that? Why would you make those things like that? That's personal
Yeah.
information now. In that world, it's worse.
Yep. I don't know. But have you already said what you gave this in stars?
Yeah, I did. I said it angrily in a rant.
Right.
But I gave it 2 stars. I was gonna give it 3, and the more I thought about it, the less I liked the book. So, and by the more I thought about it, it was like 20 minutes of thinking about it. Like I put the book down, and then I was like, ah, I'll probably be a 3 star. And then I thought about it for like 20 minutes, and I was like, no, it's a 2.
No.
Not a 1, because it was still okay to read, still fine.
Yeah.
Would you
I
give it?
gave it I gave it 3 and I was being generous and this conversation has kind of made me think I should drop it down to 2.5, but I probably won't go back and do that. But
This
yeah.
conversation has made me feel like I want to drop it down to a 1. Like the more
I
I
mean,
actually like discuss this book, the more I'm like, wow, this book does kind of suck. Like
there's
it's
just
not a good book. Like it is
so
good
many
when you're
plot
reading
holes.
it. I was never bored.
The
Like never like
voice is
super
strong.
bored.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
voice is strong. I think that carries the book is Tom being in Tom's head. He has interesting ways of putting things, even if he's not the most interesting person per se. But
Yeah.
yeah, it did not make me want to read the sequel.
No, I really have no interest in it. And it doesn't exactly leave it super open either. I mean,
No,
technically World War III is still going on, but like we already established we don't necessarily care that much about that. And
yeah,
then he kind of has like a pseudo friend that could get him arrested for treason, and he's sort of like he kind of ruins that, but it's not really clear that it's 100% ruined or not. And that's it.
yeah,
That's like then that's the end, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to read another 2 books to find out
another,
about this pseudo friend,
yeah,
and I'm not that invested in World War III, so not really going to go for it.
yeah. So next month, I picked Inkheart by Cornelia
Funk.
Funk. Sure. Is you should, well, see, this is the problem. I debated if you pronounce the E at all, but then that threw me off the L.
I've
You know,
always just pronounced it funk.
well, I've never actually looked it up. Anyway, one of my favorite childhood books. This is a reread for me, but you've never read it, right, Corey?
Correct. I have not.
And immediately upon opening it, I read that it was translated from German, and I somehow never knew that it was not written in English. So, wild.
Surprises all around. It is a chunky book though, too.
It
It's a
is.
lot. Did you see
For
how many
being,
pages it is?
it's at least over 500. So, I didn't look at the exact page number. But it's a fun one. It was a whole big thing when it came out. I remember people reading it. There was a movie, a bad movie, and yeah. So if you want to read along with that one, it's a good time. I found it very readable just picking it back up again. So
I don't know if I can read 5 million pages.
you can do it.
I
I
don't
have
know.
faith in you. It's very readable.
Okay, well, I believe you. I'm just like, I'm very tired this week. And now discussing this book, I'm just irritated with
Well,
it.
it's a good thing that February is over because that's a short
Yes.
month, and now you have an
Yeah.
actual full-size month. So
Yeah, that's true. I do need to go grab it and start it. Maybe I'll start it tomorrow. I'll take a lazy day. I'll read. Maybe. I
I
say
told you
that, but I won't.
I gave you some of a cushion so you could even read mostly to your heart's content. So
Yeah. It'll be great.
nice, good
All right.
enthusiasm.
Well, we're also bad at transitioning to the end of the podcast, which has been established in previous podcasts for sure.
hmm
Uh, was really hoping that this year was going to turn out great for my Goodreads star rating, but
I'm telling you, Inkheart is gonna turn it around.
are you?
You haven't even picked it up yet.
That's true. I have not yet picked it up, but I do kind of want to watch the movie when we're done. I hear it's terrible, but it
Oh
has
my
Brendan
god.
Fraser in it, and I like him, so maybe we'll do a book
Maybe
movie.
maybe we watch the movie.
Okay, maybe. Is there more than one movie?
No, I think there's only one.
Okay, pretty sure it flopped. So,
Yeah. Yeah, this is a
but
trilogy,
you
I
know
believe.
what? Brendan Fraser's cool. So,
Yeah, he is.
yes. And think I think my sister owns the next 2 books. So, I might not have to buy them or have you buy them.
Oh,
But I got
okay.
to ask her. So, we shall see about that if we go on and read more, but I guess that's sort of mostly my decision
Yep.
cuz my
You have
pick
to
is after this.
you have to finish this first.
Yep. I have other books to finish too. Anyway, this is the end of the podcast. If
Like,
you haven't
comment,
noticed, this
subscribe.
is the end. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Maybe one day this will be on more than just YouTube and it'll be on actual podcasting websites. You never know.
We'll keep you
Depends on
posted.
how motivated I feel
Mhm.
in getting this out somewhere else. So far, that motivation is non existent. But, you know, you can watch me play Skyrim while you listen to us talk about books.
That
Are you
you're
still
still
there?
recording? Yeah. Why did you stop there? I thought you were gonna stop recording.
No, because we gotta actually say goodbye.
Oh,
You
okay.
just leave the people hanging. All right, like, comment, subscribe. Come back next month and listen to us talk about Inkheart. Maybe I'll like it, maybe I won't. I don't know. All right, bye.
Bye.